Well, welcome back to SSON's AP Automation Global Digital Summit. My name is Naomi Secor, the Shared Services and Outsourcing Network's Global Managing Director. I'm delighted to be here with you. It has been a fantastic morning, and we're going to keep on going. So this session, 5 secrets to Drinkworks supercharging their AP automation journey. And I am delighted that we have on the line with us Drinkworks and our sponsor from TradeShift. Before we start the presentation, just a couple of housekeeping items. The console before you is fully customizable, so you can hone in, expand on any different views. Please do keep your questions coming. They've been great all morning long. We appreciate it. Just enter those questions in the Q&A tab at the bottom of the console. I also encourage you to connect with our speakers. I have provided their contact details for you on the console. And TradeShift has kindly provided some additional resources to you that I've placed in the Resource Center. So with that, let's go jump right into this fantastic case study. Over to you, Sid.
Thank you very much, Naomi, and good afternoon to everybody, or good evening, or good morning, wherever you happen to be. We've had such a tremendous morning of presentations, and this one really excites me. We've got Tara from Drinkworks, who's Director of Systems and Integration in Financial Operations, supported by Jim Rahil, Vice President of Sales and TradeShift. Really interesting presentation and going through how they manage to amplify and optimize and automate their entire environment. So if I may hand over to you fine people to continue with the show.
Sure. Thank you, Sid, for the introduction. And as you mentioned, good afternoon, good evening, good morning to everyone. Again, we are here to walk through the AP automation journey of Drinkworks and talk about the 5 secrets that they use to supercharge their AP department. So Tara, this has been quite the journey, so to speak, right? We met in person for the first time in 2019, right, when the world was a much different place. So really excited to be with you here today, to hear you tell your story, first about Drinkworks as an organization, and then to get into the AP journey that you guys have been on. So kicking things off here, Tara, I can honestly say that you guys, Drinkworks as a company, this is you guys are certainly one of the most innovative, fun, exciting organizations that I've had the pleasure to do business with in my career. Why don't you take us through the origin story of Drinkworks, how you guys got to where you are today, and what you're all about? Go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jim. And thank you for the opportunity to be here. This is awesome to share the story and to share our journey, and to, of course, brag about Drinkworks here for a few minutes. So Drinkworks started in 2017. So we are a very young company, but we are backed. We have 2 parent companies. We are a joint venture of Anheuser-Busch and Keurig, right? So that's almost a perfect marriage, right? Anheuser-Busch InBev makes some, hopefully you all know, some fine quality beverages across the world, and Drinkworks makes an awesome, and Keurig makes an awesome coffee appliance and everything with that. So you put Keurig and Anheuser-Busch InBev together and you get an appliance that will make you quality cocktails and beer in the comfort of your home. Right now, we have about 30 different cocktails, ranging from an old-fashioned to a margarita to a Moscow Mule to a cosmopolitan, and our own beer line, which we're launching only in California right now. So if you know how a Keurig works, you open the top of the lid, you put in this little tiny pod here. It contains everything you need. It's a liquid. Unlike coffee where it's ground, you put it in the machine chills it, carbonates it if it needs it. This is my favorite beverage. It's the Moscow Mule. I wait about a minute and a half, and at the end of the minute and a half, I have a delicious drink. It's amazing. It's really, really awesome. My background is with Anheuser-Busch, so 25 years as a beer drinker. Cocktails is a new world for me, and they are amazing, and most of all, they're consistent. So it's been an interesting journey how we leverage both our parent companies, their practices, their systems, but yet grow as Drinkworks is what we need to.
Awesome, Tara. And I just want to tell a quick story because if you remember one of our first meetings in 2019, I can say it was one of the best meetings I ever had, not just because of the commercial conversation we had, but post meeting, Tara took us back into their tasting room. We spent probably a couple hours there, right? Just sampling the various products, and we need to make sure we need to try them all. And this machine is so cool, guys. When you put the pot in, it makes an awesome noise, like there's some magic going around, in the background there. As she mentioned, the drink comes out in less than a minute, and they're delicious, absolutely delicious. So very, very awesome company. And I guess, Tara, quickly, in terms of the regions you guys are in today and where you're expanding to, maybe just provide us a little insight there in terms of your growth plans from a company standpoint.
Absolutely. As you can imagine, the laws around in the United States have been challenging to work around because an alcohol beverage like this size container just quite doesn't exist. So it has been a little challenging to move across the United States and the laws. We have a very strong presence online. You can, of course, go to our website and buy it, and it will tell you exactly if you're eligible to purchase or not. There are several stores. We do have the box stores, the Total Wines, the Best Buys. You could even go to Amazon. So we are really strong across the United States. We had an interesting opportunity late last fall to pilot in the UK. And I apologize, I don't remember the specific area off the top of my head, but we are piloting in the UK as well. So that's been a very interesting pilot for the last few months.
Great. Okay, perfect. Well, appreciate that intro into Drinkworks as a company. And I'm sure we could probably spend the next half hour talking about the different drinks and experience. But why don't we transition into the Drinkworks accounts payable journey? So you guys, obviously are a young company. As you mentioned, you got your start in 2017. And in terms of how we start here, why don't you sort of take us on a little bit of the walkthrough in terms of the systems you had in place, the processes you had in place. Essentially, what did the AP department look like, day one when you were there, how you handled invoices, and then certainly we'll get into some of the challenges and obstacles you were faced with that led to you looking at technology.
Sure, absolutely. Day one interest was very interesting at Drinkworks. Because we have to use our parent company, Anheuser-Busch's SAP system. So that was day one, is the large machine of SAP for small Drinkworks. At the time, we had maybe 50 employees. We just didn't have the time, the resources, or the people to navigate around Anheuser-Busch's SAP process, where on average it would take 2 weeks to receive a PO after you requested one. We just didn't have the time. We had to move extremely fast. And one of my very first challenges from my manager, because I knew the Anheuser-Busch SAP system, and I said, hey, it's going to take 2 weeks to do a purchase order. He said, no, get it in 24 hours. I was like, that is unheard of. That is insane. It will not happen. I believe was my first negatory comments to all of that. And he always says I proved him right because we actually made that work. And that was huge to get a PO in 24 hours, one business day. But again, it's very manual, very intensive, and it's also about 20-year-old technology. So kind of moving on to what systems, we really had Anheuser-Busch's SAP system. We got a little creative and put some SharePoint stuff, processes, workflows out there, but it was very, very manual.
And how were you getting those invoices into Anheuser-Busch's SAP? Was it key from data entry, or was there another system or way to get those invoices into SAP?
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the vendors who were familiar with the Anheuser-Busch system and were current vendors with Anheuser-Busch, they used an interface. Again, that interface is it was there before I started. So it's been out there for a while. And if you can imagine what a 25-year-old technology screen looks like, it kind of acted like that. So a lot of suppliers were used to that. A lot of our suppliers, since we were so small, we actually used a lot of local suppliers out of the Boston area who didn't necessarily have those electronic invoices. So my favorite invoice story is I'm actually based out of St. Louis, Missouri. And in 17 and 18, I would actually fly up to Boston at least once a month. And when I would walk in my door, my admin would give me a present every time that I would walk in, and she would literally hand me a stack of paper invoices. It became so bad that when I was packing for my trip, I actually packed either a bigger bag or allowed space for the invoices that I had to bring back. Granted, we got a little smarter. We started scanning those, and she emailed me, but I literally had a stack of invoices I would have to come through and process and upload and stuff.
Okay, well that's a new one to add to the file. You're making room in the suitcase for paper invoice.
Right.
Very good. And just in terms of your environment, to cover off all the bases here, do you have a mix of PO and non-purchase order based invoices as well, or are they primarily PO based invoices?
We have a little bit of everything. We prefer it to be purchase order. So that is our first choice. And then if all else doesn't work, we do credit cards and other things. But purchase orders are by far our primary mode of purchasing.
Got it. Okay. Well, you've outlined some of the challenges, right? Logistically and even physical challenges in terms of the process when you first started. But what else would you point to? I guess, was there a tipping point? Was there a specific event, anything that you can look at that said, it's time that we look at an automation tool, right? A platform, a way to be more efficient and productive with an AP that you can point to?
Yeah, absolutely. There were almost two tipping points, one internal and one external. External is we were using new suppliers that Anheuser-Busch had never really used before, right? When you think of the ingredients versus a cocktail and to a beer, we were introducing a rapid pace of new suppliers. So to say, hey, look at the super cool high-tech thing that we have, and by the way, log into this 20-year-old portal and help me work with you, right? So the suppliers were huge, just to the amount of volume and to their specialty. Also, they didn't have the time like what we did, also to learn how to navigate also around the Anheuser-Busch system. So that would be one. And internal, we have extremely grown since 2017. And we knew at the rate of our growth, we couldn't keep up with this. We would have to hire a small army to continue. And it just really wasn't value added time, right?
Yes, absolutely are. So I think certainly in my experience, there's two types of companies that have already achieved a level of growth and thus are maybe trying to tighten the belt or become more efficient in the way they do things, and others that can see the growth in front of them and thus before things become too hectic, right, and too chaotic, they look at automation to help them accommodate, right, and just account for that growth. So it sounds like you guys are in that latter category in terms of pursuing automation to account for future growth, correct?
Absolutely, yes. When we first launched in 2017, our goal was St. Louis, Missouri. That's where we launched. Mm-hmm. And so you can just imagine if we're in almost every state, roughly 2.5 years later, you can imagine our rate of growth in this last 2 years.
Definitely. Okay, perfect. Well, I'm sure probably more detail we can get into. Maybe Sid, I'll give you an opportunity to jump in here. Anything about the journey Tara just took on or took us through jump out to you, and any feedback or points you want to reiterate?
Yeah, absolutely, Tara. I mean, I can sort of sympathise with the journey, particularly, from a small acorn, a large oak tree grows very, very rapidly. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you is your use of credit cards as part of your procurement strategy. How did you manage that piece and control that piece, to minimise any maverick spend?
Very poorly is what comes to mind. Again, at the fast pace that we were going, the quickest thing we could do was to leverage our parent company and to use their credit cards, right? Purchasing cards. If you will, right? But you can imagine the purchasing credit cards restriction a company that Anheuser-Busch has. It's pretty enormous, right? And as it should be, right, for a company of that size and nature. So our challenges around that we were breaking all these Anheuser-Busch rules that the large company had in place because we had to, right? We were different within the company. So we did live through that pain for quite some time. And I am a huge fan of TradeShift Go. So we leveraged that platform, and I could spend another half hour telling you how we launched TradeShift Go. And that was enlightening for several reasons. And we have huge visibility into our spend and control, I think is the word that comes to mind. Because as you know, on a credit card, I always said we can't technically say no unless you return that item, which most of the time you can't. As with TradeShift Go, you can actually get approval before. So that has really been transformational to us as well.
Yeah, I can fully understand that, and the challenges with cross charges from the parent as well, you know, and treatment of tax and all those other elements must have been an absolute nightmare.
Yes. It was actually tax was probably one of our largest technical issues in trying to integrate TradeShift with SAP because we had to get the tax codes correct. And that's been really kind of eye-opening to put TradeShift on our parent company SAP system. So we can leverage the power of TradeShift and the ease and the speed and everything that we wanted TradeShift for, but yet still keep our parent company happy because it all integrates with SAP. And so that, you know, both we're happy and our parent company is happy, and we have to make them happy as well.
Of course. And do you actually leverage your own corporate credit cards at this particular point for your procurement process, or are they just or not?
We have retired all the Anheuser-Busch purchasing cards, and we strictly use TradeShift Go now, and the credit cards behind that. And again, it's not our first preference, right? Sometimes you have to physically, still in this day, go to the store and buy something. But if not, we do a purchase order. And again, if all that it doesn't work for the supplier and doesn't work for us, then we leverage a credit card.
Yeah, I understand, because reconciliation is the key on this and being able to distribute cost and so on and so forth. And I understand that TradeShift does that magnificently. Sorry, I'll step back now and allow you to continue, Jim.
Not a problem, Sid. And I'll just clarify very quickly what TradeShift Go is for the audience, so they have some context around what Tara was describing there. But what she's mentioning is the ability to essentially enroll a physical purchasing card in the TradeShift Go application and allow users to request access to that card through an approval process for spend that won't be on a purchase order. And once that access is granted, they are given a virtual card. It's a tokenized version is the word that we use of the physical card that's in their quote unquote digital wallet. So now that user has the ability to complete the spend. As Tara mentioned, it's approved prior. They can actually code the spend prior to the purchase as well, which feeds the reconciliation statement there, Sid, as you mentioned. So it eliminates invoices, but provides a level of control over the tail spend. Tara, if I got that summary correct, that's how you use it today.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Perfect. And if I may just ask a question, Tara, at this particular juncture, using that, the virtualized cards and thing, is there a sort of maximum spend level that you allow your employees to use cards for spend, or is it open-ended? We
actually put a spend limit both at the company level. So that goes basically across all the teams that we have set up. And then we can actually, in some teams, We actually then even drop it down even lower. So we could do it at a company level, and you could do it at another team, which is basically our budget entity. So there may be some teams that say, no, I don't want to allow users to spend at this level. I only want them to spend at this level. So we have it in both places.
Mm-hmm. And TradeShift manages that for you?
Yes. Brilliant.
Excellent.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you, Tara. So what we'll do now is move on to our poll question of the day. See a few examples of the drinks there. And we'll ask the audience, so I'll read this out loud, and we'll give you all a chance to answer. But in short, what obstacle from the list below would you identify as the biggest in your own AP automation initiative, if you have gone through one or you're thinking about going through one? The three options here are buy-in from internal stakeholders, whether it's the IT team, Tara mentioned integration to SAP, just executive management approval, funding budget for the project, change management for internal users, so folks not in AP or folks in AP that are used to working in systems, getting used to a new tool. And then the third would be supplier adoption of the new tools and practices that you want to enforce within the AP department. So we'll give everyone about 15 seconds here to answer, and then we'll see what the results are live. All right, I think that should probably be enough time. So I believe I hit the submit button here. We'll see what the results are. Okay. So as Tara, we were talking about yesterday, this seems to be fairly consistent with the Drinkworks challenges as well, that I know we'll get to in terms of the 5 secrets to supercharging your AP. But the winner, if we want to call it that, is change management for internal users, and supplier adoption came in second place. It's really no surprise. It's a new piece of technology. It's a new tool, and you have 2 primary stakeholders. You have buyers and suppliers. And so getting those 2 stakeholders to adopt the tool, to use it, to maximize its functionality, right, to get the most out of the investment, certainly a big obstacle. And I think, Tara, that's what we're going to talk about now in terms of your experience within the 5 secrets. Okay. So thank you all for responding there. So kind of into the meat of the presentation today, which now that Tara has gone through this journey, we're going to talk a little bit about, some of the key lessons that she learned. And we're calling it 5 secrets here, but essentially, Tara, we'll ask you to maybe share exactly what I just mentioned, the key learnings and tips and tricks as we kind of go through, as you went through your journey, and maybe what you would have done differently or done the same, right, in hindsight. So the first being collaboration, right? Collaboration is key, and I think that can pertain to both, internal users and suppliers as well. So maybe just elaborate for us, please, on that statement and what we mean by collaboration being key.
Absolutely. So collaboration to me is almost a collaboration triangle, right? Because communication is key internally to the company to let all users know this is coming, right? We have to, it's the whole change management, as the poll just mentioned, to ensure that our users internally accept the new process going forward and the new, everything along with that. The other part of the triangle is TradeShift. Right. So we worked with the TradeShift implementation teams to fully really disclose and lay all the cards out of the table on the good, the bad, and the ugly about the current process, what we had to have from an audit requirement to a nice to have, and prioritize all that. So as we were implementing this, our TradeShift implementation team told us and taught us, the project team, how to best implement that to make it again, from audit perspective and everything like that. Then it came to the other point in the triangle is our suppliers, right? That the whole process doesn't work if we don't have our suppliers on board, and they don't, if they don't use the system, then it's broken, right? So we also had to have lots of communication and also buy-in from our suppliers as well. and to go around the world and the backwards in the triangle. The suppliers then talked to Tradeshift, so Tradeshift needed to understand who Drinkworks were, what we wanted, so they can then in circle talk to the suppliers, who in turn talk to us and all that. So 3 main points, and we couldn't just focus on one. We had to really focus on all 3. So that was a huge collaboration effort.
Absolutely. Maybe a metaphor that came to mind might be a 3-legged stool, right? That if one of the legs is cut off or not very stable, right, it won't be best seat in the world. So that's
Absolutely.
a great analogy there. And maybe even talking about the vendor relationship, because I think whether it's Tradeshift or anybody else you go with, maybe talk a little bit about just how close you have to work with the vendor and the communication relationship you have with them, and how important that is to the success of the project.
Yeah, that is huge. We did pick a small handful of key vendors that we knew would be more than willing to, and we called them up. I called a couple of them up personally, and I said, we're rolling out this new tool, right, to upload your invoices and just sure you get paid on time, right? Most suppliers are not going to say, oh my gosh, don't pay me on time, I'll still use your old technology, right? So we chose a couple of the key vendors to pilot with and to kind of kick the tires on it, get to know it, and give us some feedback. And we deliberately picked several vendors, some that, were part of that paper stack in my suitcase, right, that I brought home, and some that were honestly like high tech to low tech. And we kind of picked every wide range of spectrum so we could understand a little bit more about that. And overall, I think we selected the good mix. So we heard all kinds of feedback on what the Tradeshift interface looked like compared to our 20-year-old technology that we were using.
Perfect. Thank you for that expansion. So let's move on then to the next secret here in terms of, and this may be a little specific to Drinkworks when you were looking at what platform you were going to choose in your expansion plans. You mentioned going into EMEA in the UK specifically. So how did your growth plans factor into the choice of platform, if you will?
Absolutely. In summary, we wanted a platform that would grow with us. We didn't want a temporary fix. There were other items, pieces of software we could have chosen and would have fixed that year's problem, right? We started talking in 2018 to go, oh, wow, we think this thing is really going to take off, right? And we really saw that come to life in 2018, and we thought, oh my gosh, get ready for 2019. And it did. It took off, which is amazing, right, for our company. But we wanted a platform that would grow with us and wouldn't just fix our solution in this day. And that's really why we chose Tradeshift, and again, for the integration to our parent company, because that was a really hard business and technical requirement that we had. So Tradeshift just seemed the perfect fit, that we could grow with them, right, with Tradeshift and with all the suppliers and the networks and everything that Tradeshift is excellent about it, but yet still help us connect to our parent companies.
Absolutely. Okay. And maybe one question, Terry, here that I haven't asked you before. In terms of your ERP system, you're using the SAP instance of AB InBev today. Looking out into the future, does Drinkworks have any plans at potentially moving on to your own separate instance? Is that something you guys have talked about moving forward?
No. No. As far as I know, we are still continuing to use Anheuser-Busch's SAP. Unless we get bigger than Anheuser-Busch InBev one day, but no, we will continue to use our parent company's platform.
Perfect. Well, we're rooting for you there, and the question.
That's right.
Right. The question came from the context of a lot of companies are at times have to upgrade ERPs or consolidate ERP systems. So growth is not just a physical growth in the new regions. It's also looking at a platform that can work with your other systems that you have in place. The ERP being the system of record moving forward, right? As you divest or acquire or consolidate systems. Perfect.
Jim and Tara, if I could interject at this particular point, really, we've got a plethora of questions coming through. So would you mind if I asked you one or two questions at this particular juncture?
Go ahead.
Right.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. We have a question with regard to purchase cards. In your mind, do purchase cards actually replace POs and the necessity for goods receipting?
Absolutely not.
Okay, perfect.
So our kind of general guidelines is if it's a one-time spend, right? With spend with a supplier you'll never spend again, then let's not go through the time and the effort that it takes to set up a vendor to do the everything, sure. Right? That is a purchase card, right? Or, we're a manufacturing shop, right? So unfortunately, things break, right? And we have people on the ground in the plant still in Vermont, and they may have to run to the local Home Depot or Lowe's or wherever to pick up that part, that screwdriver, whatever. In those cases, Home Depot's never going to accept a purchase order for a screwdriver, right? So it doesn't replace it, it enhances it.
Yeah, I fully understand, and thank you very much for that question. And then just another quick question, if I may, particularly talking about the future plans and everything else, or whether one's going to have your own instance of SAP or not. To Jim's point, what feedback have you received from your colleagues and internal stakeholders on their usage of TradeShift? Did they adopt quickly, and how does it improve their working lives since it's been implemented?
Honestly,
big question.
Our user, that's a big question. Honestly, our users hated it, to be quite honest, because it's that whole change management, right? We were now asking our engineers, our marketing, our sales, our plant workers, our plant managers to do something that they didn't have to do before because we had two people doing it, right? It was, they never had any kind of ownership or insight to it because these two people owned it, right? It was like, oh, Jan will take care of that. Don't worry about it. I don't know what happens, but Jan takes care of it, right? So we struggled, honestly, at the beginning because now we were saying, no, Jan is no longer going to take that. You have to request your purchase order. You have to tell me when you did the goods, you have to go in to do this. And so it was huge. That was not a TradeShift specific thing. That would have happened with any platform and any change that we had. I think we tried to minimize it. One of the successes of the project is we went live and there was minimal business disruption and minimal business noise. And to me, that's a successful project because we didn't disrupt the business as we implemented. But still, change control was huge.
Yeah, I mean, people don't particularly like change, as we all know, but they can be, we can use techniques to ensure that they actually excel at self-service, and that makes sense. And the other side of the question is, what sort of feedback have you received from your suppliers interacting with TradeShift?
And I apologize that I didn't answer the later part of your previous questions. So even though our users didn't like it at the beginning, we've been live for 8 months or so. Users love it now, right? They know where to go. They know how to get their information. It's quick and it's easy. And they say, hey, this is actually great. This is so much better than the previous, I don't know, talk to Jan, right? So they love it, right? And from a supplier point of view, we have a mixed bag of suppliers. Our suppliers that work with Anheuser-Busch are used to this old screen that, again, has been around forever, right? So those suppliers that are used to this very manual, I have to sit in front of my computer and do it because it won't work on my phone. It's so intensive, too many buttons to press. I just want to invoice you and I want to know when I get paid. Those that now use TradeShift can upload an invoice from their mobile phone within minutes, and then they know within probably one business day just how SAP communicates and calculates payment dates and everything. They know that by the next business day, they can see exactly when they're going to get paid on that invoice. So that interface from those suppliers has been a huge win, and they love that. Other suppliers, honestly, you're going to have a little more. Some of the suppliers that have their own portals and their own interfaces have been a little more challenging to work with because they have their own, and they don't want to yet learn another platform. So that's where we're continuing to close those gaps.
Yeah, well, I guess change is good, and people need to buy into whatever's fundamentally necessary for them to lubricate the way they do business with Drinkworks, and also how they get settled after a successful and authorized delivery. Sorry, I won't interrupt you anymore. I'll leave you to continue on.
That's okay. And actually, that was actually perfect setup, because that really talks about the adoption piece in the secret. So that was a good setup, Sid. Thank you very much.
You're more than welcome.
Right. So from that, you can see how supplier adoption was huge, and then also internal company adoptions, which I think I covered that. So that's awesome. And I think we've talked a lot about also the keeping the invoice processing in one place. I no longer, when I do get the opportunity to go back to Boston, I never want my admin to hand me a stack of invoices like this. And I want to use that place in my suitcase for something else, not a stack of invoices. So that's huge to simply log out to TradeShift. And regardless if I'm a manager, the owner of the purchase order, or the supplier, within a few clicks, I can see everything. I can see the request, I can see the purchase order, I can see when it's been goods receipted, the details on the invoice, and we've even implemented, hey, this is when they're going to get paid. One screen. Do you know how many screens that takes me to get to all that information in SAP? So that's kind of a beautiful, just to tidy up the shop and keep it in one place. And then the last secret to automation is to really measure your success. Sometimes it's going to be really hard type of, KPIs. You can put numbers behind it. And sometimes, like I said before, just hearing the feedback of the suppliers, that's kind of the more soft kind of intangible stuff. You can't really, quote unquote, measure, but you can get a gauge on. So those are really kind of covers the basis of all the 5 secrets or the items that we learned during this implementation.
Perfect, Tara. Thank you so much for that description, and certainly great to hear that your internal users there are loving the platform now. Like you mentioned, I think any solution you go with right out of the gate, that people are resistant to change. But if there's enough business value, if it's simple enough to adopt on both sides of the equation, naturally, that's going to lead to success of the project. The keeping invoice processing in one place is such a common refrain. It's almost hard to quantify it to a certain extent, right? The time savings for yourself, just in terms of, like you mentioned, having to go into multiple screens on a different system versus having everything at your fingertips from one spot. So we'll go, though, into a little bit of the quantification now and talk about sort of your pre and post technology. It's just a final wrap-up slide here before we conclude. So maybe talk a little bit about this slide. There's some numbers here, but you have pre-technology up top, and then post, sort of your results after implementing. So maybe walk us through this slide, please. Oh, Tara, you may be on mute there.
I apologize. Sorry about that.
Absolutely.
No, so in 2017, this really kind of shows as Drinkworks is growing, right? And I know some companies are probably looking at the amount of purchase orders in the chart over there and probably laughing at the small scale of that. But when we save on the very first point, there was one specialist in 2017 that was handling all the 434 purchase orders. That's not just making a purchase order. That's everything related to it. So like adding the vendor, creating the purchase order, doing the goods receipt, following up with invoices and payments, and the whole AP process for 434 POs. That was me, by the way. That was a lot of work, right? A lot of busy work and coordination through so many people, right? we knew what our growth would be in 18. So I pulled an old friend from Anheuser-Busch and I said, you have to help me. I'm drowning over here. Right. So that's the infamous Jan, right, at Drinkworks, right? She was my lifesaver because in 18 we went to 908. And again, her and I are just cranking through the whole entire process. Sadly, in 18, we had to coordinate our days off because neither one of us could be out of the office at the same time because the whole process would just halt, right? And I think, unfortunately, one day we did, and you would have thought the world was ending from a Drinkworks when both of us were out of the office, right? So with the year-over-year projection, we knew we would about have 50% increase over year, right? And by the end of 2020, at this rate, I figured I would need a team of 4 to just do all this manual processing. That honestly wasn't an acceptable solution. During this time, we also it took us about our SLA. We said, hey, give us 2 days to create a purchase order. It took about a week just to assure volume to manually post and accept invoices. And then I mentioned earlier, if we had vendors that could use this old Anheuser-Busch portal to post their invoices, that would reduce slightly our manual processing. For those vendors who refused to use that old portal, we said, okay, we'll post it for you, but your payment will be late at least 2 to 4 weeks. And some vendors went, oh, no, I'll use the old portal, or they just said, okay. And overall, it was really a lack of visibility into everything related to PA, our AP, like vendors, POs, invoices, payments. And we honestly just couldn't keep up with the manual workload and non-technology we were using. Afterwards, so again, we went live July last year, and that's kind of the lighter blue-green on the top. We now have the entire company as your quote specialist, right? So we've trained the entire company. It doesn't matter if you're an engineer, marketing, sales, HR, it doesn't matter. Everybody's been trained to do so. So now Jan and I can both take the same days off and the company doesn't come to a screeching halt, right? Around the AP department. Right now, we don't need any additional headcount, which is fabulous. And now we have more value-added work rather than opening physical paper invoices and putting those through. We can honestly now make a PO in less than 15 minutes. A lot of people get their approver on the line, say, hey, I'm submitting a PO. They go, okay, done. And we can get it out the door in like 15 minutes. Between a vendor posting and the owner accepting or doing the goods receipts, half hour tops. There's no delay in manual processing, and we have really one spot to see the end-to-end process. So that's really kind of our success story and the before and after. And I only expect that chart from last year to even double for this year and hopefully keep growing as Drinkworks is growing.
Well, I've got a quick question, if I may interject at this point here. This is, what are your processes around new vendor onboarding? Do you perform any risk evaluation, legal reviews, etc.? And how are you ensuring your purchases are driven or tied to procurement contracts, if they exist, of course?
Absolutely. So for the vendor risk, this is actually where we leverage our parent company, Anheuser-Busch. Mm-hmm. They have an amazing program behind the scenes. And to onboard a vendor, it's not simply adding them into TradeShift. They also have to be added into SAP. So we honestly, that is one thing that we turn over to Anheuser-Busch because they are so good and they have well-defined processes on that. And honestly, we can't add a vendor in SAP if they don't do that. So that takes care of that piece. Once Anheuser-Busch gives us the green light for that, then we onboard them within TradeShift, and then TradeShift and SAP seamlessly talk to each other for the purchase orders on that one. And I apologize, Sid, your second question?
No, how are you ensuring your purchases are driven by or tied to procurement contracts?
Yeah, so on a purchase order within a purchase request within TradeShift, when you're finalizing that, there is an upload document. And so the requester has to upload a copy of the contract, a signed contract, signed by both parties contract, within that request. The approver is not supposed to approve that if that signed contract is not attached to the purchase request. Right. So then at any point in time, there's just a small handful of us. We'll go back and audit those, right? Just say, oh, hey, this request was over a certain dollar, time, anything like that. And then we'll go back and audit it. If needed, we can bring up the chat function, messaging function within TradeShift, and then later add that if it was forgotten, added the wrong, something along those lines, just to ensure that our purchases then are tied back to our contracts.
Thank you very much for that.
So, Sid, I know we're at the top here, and I think
we are indeed.
Yeah.
And questions are coming in and flying in through the door.
Can I have Tara just very quickly in 30 seconds? We'd be remiss to not to offer everyone who attended the promo code, Tara. That you
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
So we are so excited. I am so excited to be here and to share this journey. And obviously, I'm so excited about Drinkworks, and it's really, really cool. We do want to throw out a promo code to help, accessorize your house, your kitchen, your bar, every room of the house, right, Sid?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
If you use the promo code of last call 50, all one word, it was last call 50. I am going to, you know what? I think I was trying to find I'll even make it easier for you. Or how you can use that, or there's going to be a promo code. Sorry, my salesperson just responded with another one. You can also enter TradeShift for the promo code. So you can either use last call 50 or the word TradeShift on drinkworks.com. Save you a few bucks on your appliances and accessories. That way you can buy more beverages, right, and enjoy those. I apologize. Those promo codes are limited to, here's my I have to make my legal team happy, right? Those promo codes are limited in certain areas due to the local laws. So I do apologize if those don't necessarily work in your particular area, depending where you're based out of. We can blame those lawyers. So.
Thank you so much, Jim and Tara. That was an excellent presentation, and really appreciate you sharing the lessons learned during the implementation, which seems to be working brilliantly for your customers and suppliers. So well done. So thank you again to Tara from Drinkworks and Jim from TradeShift. And there were a lot of questions that came in. We didn't have time for all of them, so we will be sending them to TradeShift, who will make sure to respond. Before you leave this console, their contact details are right there in front of you if you'd like to connect with them. And TradeShift has also put some resources in the digital gift bag for you. So thank you very much for attending. To go to the next session, simply use the green button, and that will take you there. We'll see you in 10 minutes. Thank you very much. Bye.
Goodbye, everybody.
Take care. Bye.